Okay, today we're going to talk about the third tab in our foldable, known as square rooting, and what we're doing is basically solving quadratic functions by square rooting. So we're going to have 5 total examples, and we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, go ahead and copy down the notes up here, so you may want to hit pause for a minute to write this down in your foldable if you need to. But just to kind of summarize, what we want to do is we want to get the squared term by itself. So if you have something squared, like an x squared or a t squared or whatever, you want to isolate that term and get rid of everything else that's next to it. Get it to the other side of the equation. Once you do that, you can get rid of the squared part by doing the opposite of squaring something, which is square rooting. What happens when you take the square root of both sides of an equation? The squared is gone on one side, and on the other side, you get two answers. You get a positive and a negative answer with the square root symbol there. So let's go ahead and start with number 1. This is a real basic equation. So x squared equals 4. We don't have anything next to x squared that we need to get rid of, so we can go ahead and take the square root of both sides. So I'll go ahead and do that. So when you take the square root, that undoes or gets rid of the squared part, so you're left with x on the left side. On the right side, you automatically get a positive and negative answer when you take the square root, and the square root of 4 is 2. Okay, so you get positive and negative 2. So on Math Excel, or in general, your answers are 2 and comma negative 2. Those are the two answers for that equation. Okay, our next two equations up here that we have, number 2 and 3. Let's go ahead and look at number 2. On number 2, I do have something next to x squared. I have a plus 36. I want to move everything to the other side if possible before I get rid of the squared part. So on here, I can move the 36 to the other side. When I do that, on the other side, it becomes negative 36. Okay, negative 36. So what I've done is I've got an x squared by itself. So just like the last problem, I can take the square root of both sides. Okay, and that will get rid of the squared part on the left. On the right, because you have a negative under the radical, that creates imaginary answers. So I'm going to go ahead and put an I. Okay, it creates imaginary answers. And the square root of 36 is 6. Okay, so that would really be 6i. And remember, when you take the square root of both sides, you get plus and a minus on the other side. So positive and negative 6i would be our answers. So again, that's positive 6i and negative 6i. Okay, and you can just separate them with a comma. The second one down here, which I will write in blue, I have two things that I need to get rid of. I need to get rid of the 24 and the 2. So I will move the 24 to the other side first. Okay, when I move it to the other side, since it's subtracted on the left, on the right side it would become positive because you would be adding. So 2x squared equals 24. Now I need to get rid of the 2. Okay, when I get rid of the 2, I can do that by dividing by 2. So you end up getting x squared equals 12. Since you have x squared by itself, now you can get rid of the squared part by taking the square root of both sides. Okay, and remember, when you do that, yeah, the left side, the square disappears. On the right, you get plus or minus the square root of 12. I would try to type that in your calculator. If you do, you get a decimal. So you do have to simplify the radical part. If you remember, you simplify a radical, the easiest way is making a factor tree. So I'm going to make one for 12. So 4 times 3 is 12. 3 is a prime number. 4 is not, so I'll keep going down. 4 breaks up into 2 and 2. So at the end, remember, when you have a radical, specifically a square root, every 2 of something you can bring out 1. So since I have two 2's, I can bring out a 2. And I did not have two 3's, so I'm left with the 3 underneath. So that would be your answers, plus or minus 2 radical 3. So again, write 2 radical 3, put a comma, and then negative 2 radical 3. Okay, you'd have to separate them with a comma so you know there's actually 2 answers. Okay, my last two examples are a little bit different because you have a whole side that is squared. So especially on number 4, I can't get rid of that plus 3 until I get rid of the squared part. So on number 4, I got to take the square root of both sides first. Okay, because I got to get rid of the squared before I can mess with anything. So when you do that, you are left with x plus 3 on the left side, okay, because the square disappeared. On the right side, you are left with the plus or minus And if you type the square root of 49, it's actually a whole number, so you can write it. Okay, you get 7. Okay? In order to solve for x, I need to move 3 to the other side. Okay? Since it's positive 3, I can subtract it on the other side. I can put negative 3 on the other side, so I'm going to do that. I'm just going to put it in front. Okay, so I already have the plus or minus 7, and I have the negative 3 in front of that. Now, what this means is your answers are really negative 3 plus 7. Okay, that's one of your answers, comma, negative 3 minus 7. Since you know what those answers are, you can physically find them. Negative 3 plus 7 is positive 4. Negative 3 minus 7 is negative 10. So those would be your answers that you would use for that problem. Okay, the second problem is somewhat similar. I do have the whole side squared, so yeah, I got to take the square root of both sides to start out, just like I did on the last problem. When I do that, on the left, you're left with 3x minus 8. On the right, you have plus or minus the square root of 72. If you type the square root of 72 in your calculator, you get a decimal, so you will have to make a tree for that. Okay, so I'll make a little tree right above it here. 8 times 9 is 72. 9 is 3 and 3. 8 is 2 and 4. And 4 is 2 and 2. So you can take out 1, 2, and 1, 3 since you have 2 of each. So a 6 would come out front. And you could not take out a 2, so that would have to stay underneath. Okay, so that's how I would start out the problem. Okay, in order to solve for x then, I need to get rid of 8 next. Since it's minus 8, it will become positive 8 on the other side. So if I move it to the other side, it would become positive 8, and I still have that plus or minus 6 radical 2. Unlike the last problem, I cannot add 8 and 6 radical 2, so I just have to leave it. Got to leave it like it is. So my last step would be to get rid of this 3. To get rid of the 3, then I need to divide both sides by 3. So I'm going to divide the whole side by 3. Okay? So that would be my answer. Again, I can't take anything and add it with a radical, except another radical 2. So I got to leave it like that. At the end, to show the two answers, we know we need a comma between them. One of them is 8 plus 6 radical 2 over 3. And then comma, and then the other one is 8 minus 6 radical 2 over 3. And those would be the two answers that you would have to type in for Math Excel.